right, everyone. So let's get started. Whew. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you all here with us. My name is Forrester. I'm the founder of the Quartz Wellness Collective, and I just had this on my heart to pull together something for today for Juneteenth. I know a lot of folks are getting out and marching, and even some of our guests are, as such as Crystyn is going to get out. She's in DC and she's going to get out and march later on, but she's joined us for now. I wanted to give folks a virtual experience to come together, not just for us, but for our children. Because we are in really, really challenging times right now. And as a positive psychology practitioner and a coach, which I am, my tendency is to be solution focused. But I understand that in order to be solution focused, we have to first address the pain, the problems, the trauma, the issues, the history before we can move forward. And so my goal today was to bring together a group of us to speak in our areas of expertise, to bring context to what's going on, and to bring hope for us in the solutions that we'll provide you, but also education in some of the history that we don't always get, and some of the explanations of who we are, and how we show up, and what that means for our children. Ultimately, being able to speak to our children and even to speak to each other and still have the potential to thrive despite all of what's going on. We are dealing with trauma right now, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. And so many of us know about post-traumatic stress and even post-traumatic slave disorder. If you've heard Dr. DeGray Leary does amazing talks on YouTube about this. But there's also post-traumatic growth. And my hope and my intention is that in having this discussion, we'll create more hope for the future, recognizing our resilience, because as Black people, we are strong. We have gotten through so much, and recognizing how we can move forward. So today I have joining us Joseph Edelin. Joseph, please wave to everyone. Joseph is an author and an educator. He's also a professional speaker. He is dedicated to ensuring that Black children can see themselves in their education and are given the tools to secure their own freedom. Joseph has written an amazing book called Through Our Own Eyes, and he's going to talk to us about the history that he includes in this book. And also we'll share with you where you can get this. This is going to be my daughter's summer curriculum, a part of it. Fantastic history that we are not getting in our history books in school. So extra curriculum that all Black parents, and not even just Black parents, I believe all children really should understand the fullness of our history. So welcome, Joseph.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We have Jaye Wilson with us. Jaye is a social activist, speaker, and the founder of Melinated Moms. Jaye, can you give a wave and say hi to everyone?
Hey, everybody. Thanks
yes.
so much for having me, Amber.
Jaye is the mom of an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old daughter, and she empowers moms and women of color through the melinated spectrum to improve their lives through self-discovery by promoting self-sufficiency. You can learn more about Jaye at melinatedmoms.com, and Jaye is gonna just talk to us about all of what she does. Everyone who's on this call is doing amazing things. And so we're gonna talk about, they'll be contributing to our conversation, but also highlighting what they do and why it's so important in our communities. All right, and we have Miss Crystyn C. Wright. Hi, Crystyn. Give us a wave and a hey.
Hey.
Hey. Crystyn is an educator, entrepreneur, and journalist. She's the owner of Minnie Endeavors and the mom of a 15-year-old daughter. She educates, inspires, and empowers learners of all ages through literacy, entrepreneurship, economic empowerment, and creative movement. Fantastic. We're going to speak to you more about all
this
of
extra. Crystyn Wright Diaz, mom and wife.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And Eugenia Blackmon. Hey, Eugenia. Eugenia and I have been friends for a few years, and I know she is a passionate mom. She has 2 amazing children, a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, a girl and a boy. And she is a social activist, a speaker, and the founder of Brown Parent Report. We're going to hear about Brown Parent Report. It is a incredible tool. I think you said it was like the Yelp for children of color, for parents of color and children to understand how our schools are are rated and ranked for our children and their experiences there. So we're going to
I bought Joseph's book for my kids. I'm going to do that curriculum challenge. Took me 2 seconds.
Yes. I love it. We're already making progress and taking
Love
action.
that. Thank you so much.
I love it. That's fantastic. So Eugenia is also an executive director. She's an attorney, executive director in the U.S. Commercial Compliance and Consumer Strategy and Innovation at Allergan. Allergan? Yes. Intelligent, amazing, dynamic panel of folks. I am just so excited to speak with you guys. Our fifth or sixth guest is Dr. Achil Petit. He is the superintendent of the Harlem Children's Zone. Dr. Achil and I spoke earlier this week and we pre-recorded an interview that I'm going to start us out by sharing with you. And then we'll watch that together. It's about 20 minutes long. It's a great interview. And then we'll kick off directly with our questions and answers from our panel. So just a second while I get this. Okay. To everyone who's joining us on Facebook, welcome. If you want to join in and you want the opportunity to actually have us see your questions and comments, because we won't be monitoring them in Facebook, you are welcome to register. Even last minute, you can still join us. You're welcome to register and hop on with us on Zoom. The link again is bit.ly/, bit.ly/thriving while black in all uppercase. Thriving while black in all uppercase. So if you want, you still have the opportunity to hop on and join us. And with that, I'm going to get into this interview with Dr. Achil Petit and I. Hey, welcome. I'm Amberly Forrester, and I'm here today with Dr. Achil Petit, the superintendent of the Harlem Children's Zone. And we are going to have a great talk about what the Harlem Children's Zone is doing, who Dr. Petit is, and what we can learn from the disruptive model that the Harlem Children's Zone operates by. So let's just start out by giving a quick wave. Hello, Dr. Petit, how are you? Great to have you.
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you today and just really in admiration of all of what you guys are doing. So I want to just open up and just give a bit of a history on you and the Harlem Children's Zone. So in 1999, Dr. Petit began his teaching career as a substitute teacher in an elementary school for grades 4 through 6. He landed a permanent long-term substitute position at Albany High School in 2000, where he worked as a special education teacher's assistant. In 2004, Dr. Petit returned back downstate to accept an 8th grade math position at A.B. Davis Middle School in Mount Vernon, New York. In 2005, Dr. Petit joined the Harlem Children's Zone as an after-school math specialist and became the 7th and 8th grade math teacher the following year. Dr. Petit quickly developed a reputation for moving the academic needle for students who were performing significantly below grade level and was instrumental in the development and growth of the math department. As a math teacher, math coach, assistant principal, and principal for several years, he has contributed to the Harlem Children's Zone, outperforming New York City District 5 and New York State white students in test scores. He is now the superintendent of the Harlem Children's Zone. And the Harlem Children's Zone has a mission of giving kids the individualized support that they need to get to and through college and become productive, self-sustaining adults. They work with over 14,000 youths, with 2,200 of them in their schools and roughly 12,000 kids that they serve through after-school programs, family and social service and health programs, and community building programs. Incredible. Harlem Children's Zone takes an unprecedented approach. They not only have a whole student approach, but a whole community approach to supporting children at every stage of their development and creating a pipeline to success. That gives me chills just hearing that. You guys have achieved unprecedented success and helped thousands of children and families by disrupting the cycle of generational poverty in Central Harlem through your innovative and effective programs. Wow, wow, wow. So, Dr. Petit, in your words, how does Harlem Children's Zone impact the life of its students, both in and outside of the classroom?
Again, Amber, thank you for having me. That was a beautiful entrance. I was shocked or surprised that all this was for me and about me. So I think inside the classroom, we have a unique structure where we provide high quality education for our students. And it's really simple. I think if you expect that your students are able to achieve anything, then the work that you provide behind it is going to ensure that this happens. So we are data obsessed. And when I mean obsessed, I literally mean obsessed, because in my opinion, if you look at the data is going to tell you a story. And based on that story, you're going to decide to go forward or change or tweak or add or whatever it is that you're going to do. But inside the classroom, we ensure that our students have highly certified teachers, and they have an assistant teacher to be able to help guide them. We have a principal. Along with the principals, we have a STEM person, somebody that focuses on math and science. We have a humanities person that focuses on ELA and social studies. Then on top of that, we have an operations person. That person's focusing on all the behaviors and the attendance and everything that is non-academic that will allow those professionals to do what they do best, which is to teach, which is to model, which is to provide professional development for our students. Our motto is that we do not stop until we get it right for each and every one of our students, which means that if option A doesn't work, we go to option B. If B doesn't work, we go to C. We literally go all the way through Z. And at times it means involving the CEO or involving our founder, Mr. Jeffrey Canada. So there's really no excuses for saying that our students can't learn if we're bringing the entire Harlem Children's Zone community to ensure that each and every one of our students are successful. Now, on the outside, I believe that you can't educate students if you don't understand their communities. You just cannot, right? You have to be able to work within the community, get to know the folks that make up the community, provide programs that involves the community, build relationship with those communities, and make sure that you hire people that looks not only like the community, but the students that you serve. It is incredibly important. I can't even underscore the importance of that. So when that happens, you have buy-in. And once you have buy-in, it's easier to really educate those students. But we have outside services because we do understand that from the hours of 4 to 7 that our students are engaged in activities that sometimes get them in trouble. So we have after-school programs that our students are involved in enrichment activities. We have Healthy Harlem, where we focus on reducing the BMI of our students. We have programs for parents when they come in. We have programs in cooking and making music and all of these things that young people right now are interested in. We have that. And sometimes they're with us from 7 in the morning to 7:30, 8 p.m. At night until their parents. So they're with us more times than they are with their parents. So when you look at educating the child as a whole, I think that is the secret sauce, and that's what really separates us from any other school or any other organization that I know.
That is phenomenal. I remember seeing on your website, it says that you do whatever it takes. And that amount of dedication just gives me chills just even thinking about it. That amount of dedication that you have to these children and to the communities is really unprecedented. It really is phenomenal. And so what do you believe that other schools could take from the Harlem Children's Zone's model? I remember when we spoke initially, you told us about staff, administrators coming from all over the world to learn about what you guys do. So what have you seen them adopting from your model, and what do you believe is the most valuable parts of your model that they can take and implement in other schools?
I believe that if you have a set of friends and they are all thinking about working towards going to college, then what you do or what you have is you create a college going community. So That's been embedded in their minds since they were in kindergarten. Every one of our students know that their end goal is to go to college. Knowing that not everyone probably wants to, but we leave that to them and their parents to make that decision. But we are all going to equip them with the necessary tools to be successful from K through 12. What I think other schools have to understand and take away from us is exactly that, this whatever it takes. We have values that says that we put children's first. That is just the number one thing. We do it with excellence. We do best selves to best serves. What that means is if I don't take care of myself, or if we don't take care of us as adults, then we can't be our best selves to the students that we serve, right? And then this surround our students with an army of love, meaning every single one that comes in contact with our students have to do it with from a place of love, because there's a lot of things our students go through. And if we don't, and we do not want to be just another thing that adds on to the pressure that they have to face each and every single day. And then this idea of data, when I tell you we're obsessed with data, we have this amazing evaluation department with at least 6 PhDs that literally evaluate every single goal that we have within the organization. And this really keeps us on the straight and narrow. So if we know something's not working, then we change and tweak it, but it's based on science and data, not really based on our opinions or subjective thoughts. And so when you think about that and being able to say, think about all the things that our students face, right? So if I am struggling in the classroom, I can't because I need some glasses. We have a partnership with Helen Keller where we provide glasses to all of our students that need it and free of services. We understand that in our community, it's really challenging to really go and have those conversations with a therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist. But we do make sure that if our students need it, that we will recommend them to outside professionals to be able to do that, and we pay for that, right? So not only do we pay for them, but also sometimes, and if the parents as well need it, then we'll pay for that as well. We're literally removing all the barriers, all the obstacles, and then ask this question, can our students learn? And the answer is yes. So what, you know, if programs, when programs come to visit us, they are shocked by hearing literally that we're willing to do all of this for our students. And, you know, as our founder always says, that's what all the middle class parents will do for any one of their students. It's just that our students that we serve, you know, sometimes financially their parents don't have it. So that's what the Harlem Children's Zone is there, is to literally provide financial relief for them and their parents.
That's so phenomenal because, like, as Maslow's hierarchy of needs goes, if your basic needs are not met, you can't even be focused on learning, helping, growing. And so you're helping for their basic needs to be met, which is amazing. You even told me about if a child needs their clothes to be washed, that your staff will actually even wash their clothes, which could seem like, why, or is that even important? Yes, because the confidence of the children in showing up, it allows them to show up and be more confident in their appearance. And I just hear so much of you helping children to show up with pride and having expectations of them that are beyond what society has of them, which is truly phenomenal. So what makes this model work, and why isn't everyone doing this? How do you do it?
I think first it starts with the leadership, right? But to me, you look at any good organization, you look at any good football, baseball team. I know a good football team. I'm not going to say it because it's not my team right now, but it starts with the organization, right? It starts with the mission. It starts with a clear plan, and it starts with a vision. And then we just now have to have the right people to ensure that what you put in place is actually happening. So I always look at it in 3 phases. I look at it in first phase is the blueprint, is the structure. You create a structure, you create a plan and how and what we're gonna do. 97 blocks, all the families and students in that block, we're going to ensure that they get high quality education and after school enrichment programs, right? Phase 2 is the talent, looking at the leaders in the organization. I can tell you without a doubt, this is not hyperbole or me just saying it. There are not a group of educators that I think is more qualified to do this work than the leaders that we have at the organization, at the schools, because they understand that you need to get it right until it is actually right. So the phase 2 with the leadership and the talent. And then last phase to me is the assessment. It's one thing to create a blueprint. It's another to actually assess to see whether or not it's working, right? Because there are pieces that might be working and there are things that's good, but it could have been good back in, 2000 or back in 2004, but now in 2020, times have changed. You need to reassess and see whether or not those plans, systems, and processes you put in place is still working or makes sense today. So that constant assessing our talent, assessing whether or not we have it right for each one of our students, I think that's what and why it's been working for so long. And we're never really satisfied with past experience or past successes because I think complacency really destroys progress. So I think if we're always looking at what else can we do, even though we're doing better than most, we're doing better than the districts, we've closed the achievement gap, which is huge, the black and white achievement gap. But we're always thinking like, okay, well, if we were at 75% here, what happened with the 25%? And what could we do to get those 25% over and be able to perform well? So we're by far our biggest critic. So we're always thinking about ways to doing more, right? And then we partner with the parents and having those relationships with the parents. So when you look at high expectations and you look at parental involvement, those two right there are two characteristics of successful organization and successful schools in terms of student growth.
Phenomenal. I love that you say that everything you're doing is data driven and that I always say numbers don't lie. And even as a positive psychology practitioner, it's a part of what attracted me to positive psychology because it's science based. So it's like a new type of self-help. It's not just, I'm telling you this because it worked for me, but it's actually
Right.
data driven.
Right.
So let's talk about the results. Let's talk about the numbers. Can you share some of the successes that Harlem Children's Zone has had over the years?
Sure. I think we have, so in 2012, we sent our first group of graduating students to college. And then since then, we've been able to get a minimum of 97% of our last 5 graduating students that got either accepted or transitioned to college. Last year alone, we outperformed in our ELA and math exams in grades 3 through 8. We outperformed our district, which is District 5. We outperformed New York City white, New York State white, New York City black, New York State black in ELA and math, right? And New York City, white has always been the bar because they've, consistently performing to the highest level. So we've always make it our business to say, okay, if we could at least be on par with them, then I think we're doing good work. If you think about looking at the programs we have for our students, attacking obesity, attacking diabetes, and having those programs for our students and for the parents as well, introducing social and emotional learning, which was a huge piece for me and a huge piece for our CEO in terms of how do you rebuild students and how do you repair them instead of breaking them down and introducing restorative practice so the students could understand what happened and how their behaviors impact others So introducing that so you could really understand the child as a whole, so you don't judge them. And I think those are just some of the successes. I think what we have done in terms of programs for our parents, because our schools become a community center for the community afterwards. And I think that's something that's unique as well, because our buildings don't close. So at night after we have student programs, you could find some of the community involved in salsa dancing, which is always interesting.
That's gonna be fun. Yeah.
Or just using the weight room and really exercising, and it's free to them, so they really don't have to pay a monthly payment at their local gym. And I'm sure I'm missing a lot, Amber, but those are the things that comes to mind right now.
Absolutely, absolutely phenomenal. I just want to, I told you this, I just want to clone you and Harlem Children's Zone and just put one in every city. Okay. All right. So that full interview can be seen on our YouTube channel. And if you've registered for this discussion today, you'll get a recap with that full interview. But right now, I'd like to get in live with our panelists who are live with us. However, that conversation with Dr. Achil and I is something that I wanted to share because he wanted to be here, but they are actually in the numbers and doing some assessments today at the Harlem Children's Zone. But listen to that model. I was so inspired by that. So I actually want to start with you, Joseph, as an educator, as working in the schools with your students, and how dedicated you are to the wholeness. And I think that that's really the key of what Harlem Children's Zone has accomplished. They are working on developing the whole student, the whole community, and not just the academics. So will you just speak to us about your experience in working with children of color in your classrooms and teaching them the history that you teach them?
No, absolutely. And I have been a fan of the Harlem Children's Zone forever since I got into education. I mean, I love their model. I love everything that, the vision in terms of what what they set out to do. I mean, they're setting out to heal the various impacts that institutional racism has on our children and our communities. So they're doing the SEL, social emotional learning. They're doing things with nutrition. They're doing things with mental health. They're doing things with restorative practices and all sorts of different educational practices that addresses the different traumas. And I know you're going to talk about trauma, but the different traumas that our children walk in the door with, having dealt with various aspects of institutional racism, whether that has to be with poverty, whether it has to be with education, whether it has to be with, food shortages and food deserts. And so I think, just 97 blocks in Harlem, I think it's just a beautiful model. There's a African proverb that I pretty much, base my educational philosophy around. It says, until the lions have their own historians, the story of the hunt will continue to glorify the hunter. And that's literally how I approach education. Right now, across this country, and for a very long time, our story has been told by somebody else. And the people who've been telling our stories, 9 times out of 10, do not have our best interests at heart. They do not care about our thriving. They do not care about seeing us progress, because if we do that, we start to take away their power and their hegemony over the system that we exist in. And so I got into education to teach Black children. I got into education to teach Black children about themselves and where they come from, so that they can have a stronger foundation and the educational and the intellectual armor to protect themselves when they go out into the real world and they get hit with all this, terrible things with the racism and colorism and all these other things, that they can be protected against all of that. But unfortunately, there are not a lot of resources out there to be able to do that. And I was thinking about what Brother Achil was just talking about. He says we try to make sure that we have educators, we put educators in front of children that look like them. And I think that's a really good start. But the problem there lies in that is that if the educator who gets in front of children doesn't know the history, has not been educated, and has been educated in the exact same system that has been perpetuated for generations, the same system that's been teaching white people about themselves and how great they are, and the same system that's teaching Black kids that they don't really have a history and that they don't really come from anything except for slavery, well, then what does it matter the race of the teacher that you put in front of these children? This teacher can be a Black woman, a Black man, and that's great to see that in front of you, but what is the message that that educator is imparting? And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I wrote the book that I wrote, Through Our Own Eyes, A Journey in African-American History, is because there aren't that many resources out there for teachers and for parents to be able to educate their children. We can't rely on the school system to do right by us. We just can't. This system was not created for us. And so I think having our own resources and taking our learning into our own hands, that's why I'm a fan of homeschooling. I'm a fan of after-school programs, because then you can start to take that and put it in your own hands and take ownership over the learning of your children. But one of the things that I noticed early on as an educator was that everybody starts our history in slavery.
Yes.
You know, that's exactly where, and it's like there was nothing before that. And then our history starts in this horrible, horrible period of time where we're ripped away from some place called Africa that, you know, no one really knows anything about. And then we're, you know, sold apart from our families, and we're whipped and we're beaten, and there's rape, and then there's cotton, and there's all this kind of stuff. And then we go from there, and then it skips a whole bunch of years, and then now it's civil rights movement. And then MLK came out of nowhere, and then everything is all good. And like, that's literally how our story is pretty much told. But imagine what that does to a child who is seeing for the first time some notion about their ancestors. And the first thing they see is whip marks. The first thing they see is a mother having her baby ripped apart from her on an auction block, right? Or this idea that we were bought and sold. I mean, think about what that does for the self-esteem of a child. Think about the trauma, the intellectual trauma that does to a child, right? And we're talking early on. I mean, this stuff is taught early on in schools, right? And so the impact that has is that we have this negative connotation about where we come from. And so when you have negative connotations, you have negative self-concept, you try to go away from who you are. You say, well, this is not, I don't like this. Well, let me see what else is out there. Oh, this group of people, they have a great history. They've done all these things. They created writing, and they had all this, they had, in Greece and Rome was all this beautiful stuff. And, you know, and so they aspire to be something that they're not, right? It's like the literal definition of identity crisis.
And it's a shame trigger. So, and that's a part of what happens with trauma, with people who've experienced trauma. They get these triggers of shame, and they feel ashamed of what it is that they could not control. And that is a part of how we get into post-traumatic stress disorder as opposed to post-traumatic growth, which is why I'm so glad that you're addressing this. So let me just take a step back for a second to define trauma, because I think that we really can have a lot more compassion for ourselves, for our children, for us as a culture when we understand what trauma is and how it's affected us. So emotional and psychological trauma is the result of extraordinary stressful events that shatter your sense of security, making you feel helpless and in a dangerous world. So there are three types of trauma. And you're gonna know very quickly when I read these what we're experiencing. Acute trauma is trauma that happens from one single incident. Chronic trauma is repeated and prolonged, such as domestic violence or abuse. And then there's complex trauma, which is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events, often invasive and interpersonal in nature. And that last one, that complex trauma, is what we're experiencing as Black people. We're over and over, we're experiencing trauma and the triggers that are not removed yet from our experience to let us then truly heal and move forward or forget about it, you know. So that's why it's a trigger for so many of us when people say slavery was 300 years ago, forget about it. So slavery was 300 years ago, but let's talk about why we're celebrating Juneteenth. right? So Juneteenth, today, June 19th. In 1865, Union soldiers announced that the Civil War had ended and all slaves were free, 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was enacted. Juneteenth is also known as Freedom Day, and it's a holiday of reflection to commemorate the end of slavery and to appreciate the myriad of contributions made by Black Americans to our society. Sounds great, right? But then we have George Floyd. And before that, we had Ahmaud Arbery. And before that, we had countless other names of what we've been experiencing, these triggers, these incidents that continue to happen that keep this cycle of trauma going. And so with that, Joe, I'd like to get back to your book and get, in your words, what the stories you share in your book are and why you share those stories. And I know you've spoken on that a bit, but I just want to make sure we capture that in its fullness so that we can go from the history to the trauma and then talk about the power and the legacy. And that's going to be the direction of our conversation today. So
absolutely. And I think, and I'm glad you talked about trauma. So basically what I was saying is it's all about what you put in front of children. So if you're starting your history with slavery and the horrible things that started there, that sets the foundation for what children think about themselves and their self-concept and their self-esteem. Mm-hmm. But our history started way before that. Like we were literally the first people on earth. And so, I mean, imagine teaching a child that, hey, there wouldn't be human beings without Black people. Life started in Africa, right? There's scientific evidence to talk about that. And I talk about that in my book. And then we could talk about ancient Egypt, or what people call Kemet, right? And Kemet literally meaning the land of the Blacks, or land of Black people. That was the original name of Egypt. And then the Greeks came over and changed it. So, I mean, imagine talking about the only one of the 7 wonders of the world still standing are the pyramids that Black people built. Imagine talking about Black people created paper, right? Imagine talking about that Black people created the first religion, the first system of writing, the first system of government, the first hospitals, the first universities. The only university in the world for a very long time was the University in Alexandria, which was in Africa. Literally, the whole world had to come to Africa to learn. So imagine the difference you have on a child, or the impact you have on a child when you start talking about that story versus starting the story in slavery. And so what I did was, and I'll open it up just so you can see a little bit. So on one page, you'll have the text, right? And so this talks about like the ancient Moors. And for those who don't know about the Moors ruled Spain for 800 years. In Europe, they were going through this whole thing, you've heard about it, called the Dark Ages, right? And in the Dark Ages in Europe, there was nothing going on. There was no intellectual development. There was no kind of intellectual striving. They didn't bathe for like 2-3 weeks at a time. They didn't have hardly any spices. They didn't have hardly any architectural achievements. And then the Moors come over from Africa, and they literally changed society in Europe so that they could come out of the Dark Ages. And now you have the Renaissance period, and now you have the Enlightenment period. Literally came right after the Moors left Spain. And that was because of all the education that the Moors brought over. So, for instance, so you have this text here, but then what I do is I pair it with reading comprehension questions. So not only are they learning, but you're making sure that they understand what they learn. And so you have that. Then I have like more hands-on activities and things that you can do as a family to work with this, work the information with your children. And then I included some STEM things here. So every reading, every text has this same exact format where there's a reading comprehension, there's activities, there's math and science questions. And if you look here, right here, there's a QR code that if you scan your camera over that QR code, a video will come up, and it will show a video about that topic that's on that page. So it will link you to a YouTube video that will help your more visual learners learn more about that topic. And now the reason why I put all that in there, so that it's more than just reading, you're being interactive, and now it's a thing that you can do as a family to help your children learn about the history of our people that does not start in slavery.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Joseph. And I put your link, a link to Project Eugenia in the chat. And you all are welcome to please visit his website, get the book, get it for your children, get it for yourself. Because listen, I'm reading the book with my kids. So we are going to move into speaking about Jaye and the work that you do with with women and focusing around motherhood. However, before we do that, I'd just like to open up, Jaye, Eugenia, Crystyn, is there anything that you want to comment on that we've discussed or that's come up so far before we progress in our conversation?
My heart is beating fast just listening to what I can't wait till this is over so I can order the book myself. Like, I feel like you touched so many points that are so important to everyone, to parents, to children, to educators, to all of the people who impact us in the way that we live and are able to thrive. So, like, I don't even have anything else. Like, I'm blown away. I cannot wait to start this. I want to now homeschool my kids, like, officially and effectively with that type of program. So thank you for creating that and thinking of us when you did it.
Yeah. Eugenia,
Eugenia. Yeah, I just wanted to say, when we speak about the whole child, this is exactly what we're talking about. You know, later I'll speak more about, you know, trauma and all those other things that are important, but this is really where it starts. This is psychological conditioning or unconditioning, right? Mm-hmm. So once you start figuring out exactly who you are, exactly where you come from, then it sets up a whole new mental space of how you're receiving what you're being taught. So I think it's a very important piece. And I'm excited about how you created it, because as somebody who creates curricula, having like the interactive stuff so that people don't feel like they're just being bogged down with reading, being able to go to this resource and that resource and making it a whole family situation. I love that. So
thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
One thing to add, that what I most love about this conversation is we're really talking about empowering parents, right? Empowering people to, you know, everyone can't be a homeschool family. I know I can't, I have to work, but to be able to have a resource and a tool that I can use on the weekends or in the evenings, or I can integrate into our home culture, I think is very powerful. And I think as families of color, these type of resources are very needed. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you said it so well about what our history is rooted in and how that affects our pride. And so that was a part of why I was so passionate on getting you into this conversation, but also on getting your book. I think before we even spoke and connected, I had ordered your book already. So it really is well written. And so thank you for that, Joseph. All right, so Jaye, as the founder of Melinated Moms, your work is focused around motherhood, starting with the phases of pregnancy and how that leads to how we educate ourselves and our children. So let's talk about your work and what you've learned in working with mothers and children of color.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me a part of this amazing, powerful panel. I'm so excited to be able to share and learn and grow with you all. But the main thing I learned from creating Melinated Moms and from holding the hat of the founder, but also a woman who still is impacted by this work, I'm learning that as a mom, we are our child's first teachers. And I'm learning that in order for me to be a better mother, a better woman, a better friend, or any other hat that I have, I need a community around me. And that helps me to thrive, and that also gives me the strength and ability to help my children to thrive. So when I created Melinated Moms, the initial need that I was trying to fulfill was finding a community around myself and my children. I went through a divorce, and I'm a transplant here in New Jersey, so I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and that's where all my family is. But I had been here for years, and I didn't want to completely uproot the roots that I have placed here in New Jersey. But I also knew that in order for me to be an effective mom, I had to have support in other areas other than just a babysitter, right? So I needed to know what that looked like. What does a good support system entail, you know? So I went out, I started looking for things that currently existed. And there were many mommy groups and organizations that did currently exist. But I felt it was a very big disconnect from the needs that I had. One was representation. I never saw women who looked like me, who had the experiences that I went through in the spaces that were available. I also did not feel there were ways to connect on a deeper level. It was just very superficial. So I'm like, how can I find a way to connect with other moms, to connect with my children, and then also feel that I'm forming a bond, a community, you know. So I made it up. So I said, you know what, in order for me to find what I need to go out, cast this line, and see what comes back, you know. And thankfully, we're 3 years later, we've grown from just a mommy group that met up in the park to an advocacy network, an amazing platform that holds space for women to have visibility, for women to understand their representation does matter, and a space for us to have our children and then understand why their representation matters, right? Because as children, and a lot of cultures feel this way, you know, children are supposed to be seen instead of heard, but that's not true. Like, little people grow into adults. So if you have a child and you are telling them from the moment that they're born that they're going to be invisible, once they become an adult, they're going to continue to have that same mindset. Yeah. So I'm teaching my children, and I'm teaching the women in my community to understand the visibility of your child isn't seen as disrespect. It's seen as a way of expression. And you, as their mom, you began, like I said, you begin as their first teacher. So you teach them how to utilize their voice in an appropriate way, and then also know how to advocate for themselves in every space that they occupy, you know.
Yeah, Jaye, that's so true. And you know, you mentioned when we were preparing for this, something that just made me think about how unique we are as a people and how our needs are so unique. And so it is so important for there to be groups like your group, like Melinated Moms, where you can come and be understood, heard, and supported for our own special, unique needs. So you told us about young ladies as young as 11 being put into positions to be the mom where they don't feel education is a priority for them. This was one of the things we talked about in our preparation for this call. The amount of weight that young women sometimes have to bear, and men, young boys and girls have to bear on their shoulders for their families, and how that can affect them. So will you just speak a bit more about that?
Absolutely. So there was actually a theory or a hypothesis that came from this. In 1992, Dr. Arlene Geronimus, she did a study here in New Jersey, in Trenton. And originally the purpose was to find out why there were more Black teen mothers in that area, like why they were getting pregnant, why weren't they on birth control, why they weren't being careful. And what she actually found out is it wasn't them having lack of access or awareness of, you know, the parameters of pregnancy. It was actually because of weathering. So weathering is actually, it's a, how do I describe this? Weathering is a way of breaking down a person by discriminatory factors, you know, so they've been constantly under large levels of stress and constantly put into positions where they couldn't be the chronological age that they are. They had to be older. They had to have more responsibility. So at 9 or at 8 years old, they're watching their younger siblings. They're coming home early. You know, they're coming home on their own. They're learning how to cook meals. They're taking on more adult roles. So when it came to them becoming 14, 15, 16 years old and facing, you know, sexual activity or exposure to certain things, they feel that they already had the experience because they had already started to live that life, if that makes any sense. And it's funny though, speaking of weathering, because when Dr. Geronimus actually presented that theory, she was shot down. Like, and I could talk forever about like data and how that's always been diminished when it comes to communities of color. But that's another webinar. But when she put it together, it blew her mind as a white woman to see that her initial thought was, these people are being irresponsible. These people, and I'm saying it on purpose, these people are being irresponsible. These people have no control. They want to live on, you know, these systems. but she found out that that wasn't true. And when she brought that to the scientific community and the academic community, it was so rejected for so many years. It took her actually learning how to advocate for women of color for it to actually be accepted, and for her to know, like, there is something else to this, and it's not what you all have taught us. It's not all of the stereotypes and all of the implicit biases, all of those things that have been generally taught. That's actually not true, you know. And I think it takes a lot to say that as a white woman to, you know, the white community, when they're generally taught to, you know, diminish anything that had to do with communities of color. So yeah, I could spell it out, but yeah, it was very fascinating to see how it related to how we parent our children, and, you know, the roles that we take as women, even from when we're young girls, you know. Young girls in our communities, we're given dolls at 3 and 4 years old, and you're taught how to take care of this baby. This is your baby, your responsibility. You have to do this. Young girls in other cultures, they don't have those responsibilities. They're taught, you need to learn, you need to go to school, you need to have a future. A lot of community colors, especially black children, are taught, you have to have a job, you have to have a responsibility, you have to take care of the now. You can't plan for the future. You have to know what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. So Jaye, that's it's so key that you said that, because as I spoke to Dr. Petit, that's one of the things that we discussed, in that we're so busy with our basic needs being met still as a people because of our situations, that it's quite often challenging to focus on anything else outside of your basic needs being met until your basic needs are met. So Crystyn, I want to invite you to chime in. Jaye introduced me to Crystyn, and Jaye, you're just so full of good people. I just love being connected to you, and I'm so grateful for you. Crystyn, this is an area where I know you are very passionate, and you are passionate about the way we guide our children through their past and current traumas, and the importance of how we talk to our children about who they are, how they should act, and who they have to be. So I just would like to welcome you into the conversation and get your feedback on what Jaye has just said, and then we'll talk a bit about your work as well.
Thank you. So first, I just want you to know I'm going to be dropping lots of resources, just because my mind is racing like a mile a minute. And I'm like, oh,
I'll try to capture them and put them in the chat. Okay.
And just to tie into what Joseph shared, what Jaye shared, and even what, you know, he spoke on with the Harlem Children's Zone. I love the idea of creating a community. I love the idea of, you know, working with the whole child. I have worked with the Harlem Children's Zone at one point. I actually taught pregnant teen moms, and we talked about health, and we talked about, you know, taking care of children. Another part that's really important, though, with all those numbers, is that there are people behind the numbers. And so, you know, sometimes we can get so obsessed with the numbers because everybody needs funding. But what Jaye just said was, the statistics told us one thing with these girls, but when we actually dug a bit deeper, there were other things going on. And so as an educational consultant, I've been working in schools for a very long time. And I feel like I really got my education skills up working in Hunts Point in the Bronx. If you guys know anything about Hunts Point, Google HBO. Back in the late 90s, that was the environment that I was working in. Those were the children who I was serving. And I like to, you know, while we're talking about trauma, I'm also going to throw in some information on bias. The company that I'm currently working with, Girls Leadership, the organization, awesome organization right now for girls and just for educators learning about trauma. We talk a lot about like how we're showing up in our spaces. They currently, anybody who's interested in training, there's something called the Power Collaborative that we're doing right now, and it's culturally and trauma-informed teaching so that we're healing in our classrooms. And I look at how I walked into the classroom to teach programs, where I started off like, you know, come in, you know, I was, you know, real old school, you know, the way that I taught. And over time, I started to really get to know these students. I started to really get to know these families. I heard lots of offhanded things from teachers in different spaces about how they felt about coming into this particular community or how they felt about parents. And there are definitely times where I was like, well, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see this. And, you know, sometimes when you're not looking at the whole picture, it's very easy to judge. And so the work that I do when I go into spaces of teaching parent workshops, which is a bulk of what I do right now, is paying attention to the whole child, right? Just an example, when I started giving parent workshops, I was like, well, how come people, they have the money, the school has the money, why aren't they coming out? We always talk about these communities and there's no money. Well, here goes the money. Right, but so-and-so works 3 jobs and so-and-so has children to watch at home. And so one of the things that I did when I was teaching workshops at one school is I created something where I had one person come in and teach the children so that they could bring their children with them. I'm teaching computer skills to parents who don't speak English. They are there on time in the snow, right? Because I said, I'll provide somebody to watch your children for you. And so I think it's just, when we look at education, we have to look at all the factors that are involved. How am I showing up to this space? And what am I teaching these children to think about themselves, right? So we listened to Joseph talk about history, imperative, right? Educators knowing history, imperative. Because if you just come into a community and say, I'm here to teach, and that's all you're there for, you're not really creating a community, right? You're just coming in, you're doing your job, and you're going home.
Yes.
And I do want to acknowledge burnout, because I have coached teachers on behavior management. They're up against a lot. You know what I mean? Sometimes they're not supported by administration. Sometimes the superintendent is looking for those numbers that we keep talking about, right? And so that's one of the reasons why it's really important to understand they're humans, right? They're humans. And so then we get to consider the numbers that go with it, but we're serving people. When I started teaching parent workshops, one of the biggest workshops that seemed to matter the most was stress management. It started off as just coming in and teaching stress management techniques. I had women in the South Bronx have full breakdowns on disconnections from family members, losing parents, losing children, illness, diabetes. I mean, there's so many other things going on in a lot of the communities that we serve, where we just can't say, well, how come they didn't do that? How come they didn't do this, right? It's so much bigger than what we're being taught. And so I think education should always come from a perspective of in the question, right? We can be teachers, but we can also ask questions. We don't have to land on opinions and ideas of what people need without actually asking them what they need. And I think something like Melinated Moms is important, because a lot of times we have needs and we think we're the only one who has those needs, only to find out that there's a whole community of people who are also saying, I need this or I need that. So I said I would drop a few resources. One more. Another thing is financial empowerment, right? So while we're learning about our history, while we're learning how to care for ourselves, while we're learning that we may need to go and talk to somebody about that thing that we're feeling, being financially empowered is extremely important. Right now I taught a couple of weeks ago an entrepreneurship workshop. And when I teach those types of programs in schools to parents, I have parents who are on public assistance. They're saying they just cut my check for this. I have a special needs child. I can't take the bus to go where I'm supposed to be going. And I say, well, don't you cook? Don't you create flyers? Don't you knit, right? What are ways that you can economically empower yourself, right? Right now, sometimes it is what it is. There are people who have to depend on the government for a number of psychological reasons as to why they have a fear of leaving everything they've ever known, right? We have to be wired a certain way. Somebody just put in a resource. So check that resource. There's a program that I worked with years ago called Money Savvy Kids. And it allowed me to be able to push into schools in the South Bronx and teach third graders what an entrepreneur is, what a profit is. They got these little banks that had save, spend, donate, and invest. And it was a woman named Susan Beachman. Awesome lady. I haven't seen of this woman for years, but that was very impactful in that community. I took those kids to the bank and showed them how to make a deposit and a withdrawal, right? So imagine at that age, understanding that you can be economically empowered.
Yeah.
She talked about the test that they did with kids where they give you one donut, you have one donut now, you have 2 in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And what that showed is the kids who waited the 15 minutes, their brains were just wired differently. Mm-hmm. And so the idea was that it doesn't mean the kids who took the donut right away are bad. It doesn't mean they're greedy. It simply means that most of us are not wired that way. And so if we could look at finances that way and say some people have to be taught finances because they're not wired in a way where they're going to just have delayed gratification, that's actually the way everything else works, right? We also talked about our needs, right? If you're just hungry, I don't have time to wait because I'm hungry. So we have people who are hungry, right? We have people who are just not necessarily wired that way. And often when they leave the community, the ones who did wait for those 15 minutes, made it off to college, they go, well, why couldn't you just do what I did? Because I wasn't wired that way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what education is about. The things that we learned, we can actually unlearn them. The things that we didn't have access to, we can actually give access to people so that now they know their history. Now they know that this thing that I'm feeling in my brain is not me just, you know, something is wrong with me. No, actually you have anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many things that I feel like create the whole child. And when you're aware of who you are as a parent, as an educator, as somebody who's, you know, has a job space these students are stepping into, then that makes it easier for them, because it's often the external factors that are affecting them, not the internal.
Yes. And that's just so, you just said so much. There's so much to bite into there. One of the key things that I want to highlight of what you said is our ability to learn what we don't know, and to have the tools, and the importance of having the tools, which is a part of why I do the work that I do with kids, is to give them the tools to understand how to manage their social and emotional interactions with other people and with themselves, so that they understand how to show up, and how to show up confidently, and know and have compassion for themselves, and know that, you know, this is anxiety, this is depression, this is my nervous system kicking in, and I can calm this. And then understanding that, you know, that there's nothing wrong with them, and not having shame around maybe even some of the post-traumatic stress characteristics that they may be exhibiting, but understanding that that is putting words to, this is what I'm exhibiting, and this is what can be done to overcome that. And that's so important. Crystyn, you are really powerful in what you do. And one of the things that stood out to me most in our conversation and preparing for this is, and I mentioned it earlier, but I just want you to speak a bit more on it, but about how we tell our children they should show up, not making our children be conditioned to show up in a way that's comfortable for other cultures, but recognizing what not being ashamed of how we show up, of our colors, of our voices, of our style, of our hair. So I know, because this is going to be a great segue into speaking to Eugenia, because Eugenia is unapologetic in the way she shows up, and her children shows up, even when they are in these schools where they may be one of the fewer brown kids. They show up proudly as who they are. And I know that Eugenia is very intentional with her children, and making sure that they feel the pride in who they are to show up that way. So Crystyn, will you just speak to us a bit about that as well?
Sure. So just shout out to the two afros that I see with Jaye and Eugenia today. Snaps for you, because those afros are popping. I tamed myself a little bit today for y'all. But just to speak to that, I went to an HBCU, and, you know, me and my girlfriend, who's actually one of my girlfriends who's here with me right now, April, we talk a lot about how we were prepared as far as professional development. You know, I love FAMU. Woo woo. But I will say that I remember people, not necessarily people from my school, telling me when I did have a big afro, I was going to have to fix it to get a job. I didn't. I always felt like if I show up as I am and you don't want me, then that's what it is. Now, I do also teach professional development. So I always have conversations around, you know, getting your foot in the door, creating your own spaces. So there's never like one way to do it. But I do like to talk about the whole respectability politics conversation. I kept seeing these fine young men pop up in Harlem with suits on, marching last week. I thought it was awesome. They looked wonderful. But I also saw something attached to it that said, this is how we're supposed to do it. There is no one way to be Black, okay? And what we tend to do with our Black children is almost put them in these constraints of who they get to be without just being free. You know, I've spoken to Black mothers. I'm at the pool. There are these, you know, children who are not Black. They're jumping around. They're acting wild. And we're telling them, sit down, be still. Don't, you know what I mean? Like all these constraints. Why? For survival, right? Because if you're worried about them going out into the world and being shot down by cops, now you have to always be conscious about if they're behaving. But that is also a trickle down of white supremacy. So now I have to raise my child who has to be in fear, who can't feel free, who can't just be who they are, because the world is going to judge them. And as parents, we get to check ourselves with that. Like, how are we imposing how we feel people are supposed to be on our children? I mentioned girls leadership earlier, and again, shout out to girls leadership, because I do feel like teaching workshops to girls in effective communication, saying how you feel, looking people in the eye, asking for what you need. We actually have workshops right now that you can sign up for. We used to only operate in New York, New Jersey, Colorado, and California, but the COVID has made us go viral. So sign your girls up. You know, hopefully we can diversify our audience, because we tended to go to certain types of schools, which I hope Eugenia, you know, steps in later and talks about those types of schools, the private schools that we serve. But in teaching young girls how to be confident and how to just one, I'm gonna make it as fast as I can. One particular exercise, we talk about apologies. And when I went through my training, I remember them saying, do you over apologize? And right away I was like, no. And then somebody described what happens when somebody bumps into them and they respond and say sorry. And I was like, oh my gosh, I do that. Why do I do that? And then the deeper I thought, the more I was like, oh, because I never want other people to think that I'm aggressive. And so that aggressive word that gets attached to Black women in particular, when we simply talk, ask for things directly, don't necessarily smile to appease
assertive,
people who we're
not
speaking
aggressive,
to.
but just being assertive.
Exactly.
Makes
and
us the
let me
angry
tell
Black
you,
woman.
it is such a stigma in different spaces where, you know, one of the things girls leadership acknowledges is we're telling girls, say how you feel and ask for what you need, but all girls are not received the same way when they do that, right? One girl is like, oh, wow, look at her. She's so proud and confident. Then another girl is like, why does she have an attitude? How many times do people say that you have an attitude simply because you asked for something and you didn't smile when you said it? Why do I have to smile to make you feel comfortable and good all the time? And so that's another thing I think we need, you know, just as a segue, when we're talking to our children, stop always feeling like you have to appease people. You don't have to hug Uncle so-and-so if you don't feel that in your energy, if you feel bad vibes, right? Allow them to be able to honor how they're feeling and allow them to be able to articulate how they're feeling to you. Yeah. So that goes back to what Jaye said, with children are not invisible. They are little humans, and whatever we instill in them at these young ages is what they will carry into adulthood. So when I teach little girls to speak up for yourself and say how you feel and look somebody in the eye and tell them stop in kindergarten, my hope is that when they turn 18 and they go off to college, they're going to be able to use those same tools when they find themselves in an uncomfortable situation. And I didn't set my daughter, you know, or any of these other girls up when they're in an uncomfortable situation to just smile and not want to harm anybody or make them feel bad. So that that segues us into being in spaces where people continue to make you feel like you have to shift yourself to be accepted and to be allowed to be there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So you got snaps all in the chat, and I'm gonna do those out loud because I almost yelled amen like 5 times during everything that you just said. Ty Kuttner also said we live in a hostile environment and we also pass down our fears to our kids. Yes. And I put girls leadership in the chat for those of you who want to look more into that program. Davon Smith says, love that topic around how to show up as who you are and deconditioning parents to impose that show up conditioning to their children and kids. Yes. Yes. So that actually is a very good segue. Thank you for all of that, Crystyn. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's a very good segue into speaking with Eugenia. So Eugenia, as I mentioned before, I really respect your parenting, and I know that your experience in finding the best educational environment for your 2 children has been highly intentional. So if you could tell us a bit about your journey and even some of the reflections that you have after hearing us talking, Crystyn, Jaye, and Joseph, about Black children and what they're experiencing in schools. But just tell us about your journey and how you came to create the Brown Parent Report, which is such a great resource. And I'm going to put the link to your website in the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Amber. And thank you, everyone. This has been a very engaging conversation. And before I kind of get into my story, I just want to emphasize that every single person on this chat right now, I see so many people agreeing, which means you have a lot of these thoughts, these passions, these inclinations. You know, it doesn't require you to have 1,000 people audience to have these conversations and to represent these, you know, experiences and these thoughts. Just talking to 5 people in your office or at your church or at the grocery store, wherever, has such a powerful impact, because that 5 leads to another 5. I mean, coronavirus showed us the power of one person. If one person can spread it to 50 people in New York, I think one person having a conversation at a grocery store can really have lasting impact. So I just want to say that we all have the power to be on panels and have these conversations. So, but Amber, to what you were saying, like many of the panelists, my journey kind of started through my experiences as a mother. And I'm going to tell a really quick story that my son, Elijah, brought into my life through going to a Montessori school that really kind of taught me to look differently at the schools that I was putting my children in. And so I get a call one day at work, and the head of the school is saying, we want to talk to you about something that happened at school with your son. Elijah stood up in front of the class today and said that for his 5th birthday, he was only inviting little brown boys like himself to his party. And this conversation has a lot of layers. I've talked to Amber about it. I'm just going to stick to the point of this share here. And he said he was going to also invite little light-skinned girls. Again, another panel. So she immediately goes to say how this was very unacceptable. It's a problem that they are a colorblind school. And, he was pulled out of the classroom because of this comment. And hearing that after my child had been in this school for 3 years now was jarring, because I'm thinking colorblind, that's a very interesting response or reaction to a child of color standing up very confidently in front of a room and announcing something. Now, whether you agree with what he said, or maybe he did somehow isolate other, maybe darker skin or light skin, whatever people in the room, the fact that she's telling me the school is colorblind was very concerning. And my reaction to her was, honestly, I see that as an opportunity for you guys to talk about color, to talk about what he meant. When he came home, we had a conversation about it. And honestly, it was very innocent. The people that he was going to invite that are his friends fit those definitions. And so he was really saying, I'm going to invite my friends to my birthday party. But it really kind of shifted the way I looked at my school. I looked at this Montessori school as a great opportunity for my kids, but I hadn't really thought about what else was behind the academics and the curriculum. And as I did that, right around that time, we're now looking for a school for him to go start 1st grade. And I'm going to these school interviews, and I'm seeing that, particularly at independent schools, that all of the communities were predominantly whitewashed. And so I may see, one brown child, one Black child, one Asian child, but they didn't look happy. They weren't smiling, they weren't glowing. And when I would ask about their initiatives for families of color or people of color, they gave me a very canned response. And so I really felt like I was in a place where I'm looking for a school. My kid would spend the majority of their time at school. They're there from 9 to 3. If they're in after school programs, they're there till 5. We're at work. So this school has 40 hours a week with my child. And there's a lot of learning going on there that honestly, it's going to take years for me to unearth, right? And uncondition. So there were no resources, right? I mean, I'm a transplant New Jersey, and I've been here now almost 10 years, but in terms of having a community where I can talk and learn about all these schools, I just didn't have that reach. And so the Brown Parent Report was really born out of that. How can parents, whether you're looking at a public school, a charter school, or a private independent school, how can we really do that research to see what the experience of Brown children are within the community, not just from do they play well with other kids, but what's the curriculum? How are the faculty and staff? How is diversity addressed? Is it just a potluck that's once a year? A lot of schools consider that to be their big diversity initiative, which to me we're more than food, the food that we eat. And there's lots of people that eat a whole myriad of different types of food, but yet are still have biases and have racist sentiments behind their conversations while they're eating that food. So, the Brown Parent Report started there. I am really excited about all of the initiatives. The goal of this reporting system is for a national network of schools where we can go on, we can look up a school in a zip code, and we can get the 411 on what's really happening within brown schools. If you look on Niche, if you look on any of these other school websites, they really don't address diversity in children of color. And if they do address it, which Niche recently did add a element to it, it's really about gender. And gender is important, gender diversity is important, but it is not the same thing as ethnic and racial diversity. And it does not have the same impact, honestly, in corporate. I'm a big advocate in corporate America too, but I'm gonna focus here on education. So, you know, the ask is that families will go on there. It doesn't matter what type of school your children are attending, and do a report and be thorough. It's 25 questions on the report, 15 questions on a parent perspective, and then just 5 demographic questions. And some folks will wonder, why do we have demographic questions? And I want to emphasize, you know, a couple of folks mentioned this as well. There is diversity within diversity. All Black people do not think the same. All Asian people do not think the same.
Say it again.
You know, we are all diverse. We are all different. We all have different needs. We're all coming from different backgrounds, different family lifestyles. And so that demographic information is not meant to isolate or condemn. It's really meant to highlight that we are all different within this subculture. So it's important for us to raise our hands and acknowledge what our backgrounds are.
Thank you. Thank you. Wait, I'm putting in the chat right now just the Brown Parent and the Brown Parent, the brownparentreport.com, and asking for you and with you, Eugenia, that parents on this call, please go on to the Brown Parent Report. Please fill out the reports about these schools and help Eugenia to populate this information that's so valuable for all of us. The importance of this, in so many ways, what I hear is that you're helping us to position our children to thrive. You're helping us to be educated and informed in the decisions that we're making about where we're sending our children, not just leaving it in the hands of other people. And at the heart of that, we have to care more about ourselves than we expect other people to care about us, which is why I brought the 4 of you together, as well as Achil earlier this week, to speak to us, because I know that you all represent that so passionately. So we just got about 9 minutes left until 2 o'clock, and I don't want to keep people much longer, but so many folks who are on have stayed on. And so we see that you're getting a lot from this conversation, and we're so grateful for the opportunity to bring it to you. I'm going to just address one question before I ask my question. Asia said, what's the name of the girls' workshop, please? And I think you're talking about the girls' leadership. So Crystyn, will you
It's called Girl Grown Up Workshops. So they go from K to 8th grade. And it's you and your girl, you know, whatever parent, whatever caretaker is there, you're doing role playing, you're learning effective communication skills. Just really, really briefly, while we're talking about schools, my daughter went to the Learning Tree in the Bronx, which is a African-centered cultural school. It goes from K to 8, preschool to 8, and many people are not even aware that there are schools like that exist. Whenever I speak to my friends who come from rich cultures that they honor, my Jewish friends, Albanian friends, they take so much pride in sending their children to schools that are culturally aware of where they come from. Yeah. And so we tend to think that when we go to other schools, it'll, you know, put us in a better standing. And there are reasons for that too. But I just want to say there are schools that are available to us where we can send our children. Freedom School is something that's all around the nation. They do mostly after school programs, summer programs. And when I did work at the Freedom School, I was the coordinator in Mount Vernon, New York, very small vicinity. It served a large amount of students. Those students' reading levels went up by 3, just going to Freedom School and reading culturally informed books and digging deep into those books and talking about what it means to the self, what it means to the family, what it means to the community, what it means to the country, what it means to the world. And so that does change the way students learn. There are resources available to us. We just have to seek them out, sometimes much harder than we would. You know, we didn't know about Joseph's book. Now we do. We're all going to go out and buy it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So just being able to share these resources in spaces like this, share them with your friends. When you're done with this, go on Facebook, drop everything that we have over in that chat so that, you know, families who are trying to figure it out can. I also have a friend who has an organization called RISE, Raising Imhotep Scholars of Excellence. It's on Facebook. And she uses Afro-centered curricula to bring parents in who are homeschooling their children. So Joseph, I'm sending you straight over there because I know she would put your book as part of the curriculum for parents to use. Her name is Talitha please, I'm gonna mess up her name. Talitha Abwem, Abwele.
Okay. Raising Imhotep Scholars.
It's called Rise.
Okay.
Rise, and it's on
I put that
Facebook.
in the
It's a
chat.
Facebook group of African American parents looking to homeschool their children or just looking for resources.
Yes.
Raising Imhotep Scholars of Excellence.
Of Excellence. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank you for that. I work with a lot of homeschool groups. That's awesome. I love that connection.
one last thing, Crystyn, the name of the school in the Bronx that you mentioned, so we can put it in the chat, please.
The Learning Tree Cultural Preparatory School.
Okay.
And just one thing to add to that, I think.
And there's also the Garvey School, another one. So there are a few of them in our area.
The Garvey School is great.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay. Eugenia, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I'm also obsessed with data. And I think that the real value of a site like the Brown Parent Report is that we can have data not just on schools that are doing things wrong, but also schools that are doing things right.
Yes.
And when you have that data, which, when you're going to the government, when you're going to federal funding agencies, and you can show this is what families are thinking, and this is where families are seeing growth, and this is where children are thriving, it's a really powerful thing. I just wanted to throw that in there. I know you have 5 minutes, so I don't want to.
No, I'm glad you made that point. Very well said. And Ty Kuttner just shared a resource, Urban Intellectuals Black Achievement Flashcards. Thank you. That will sound amazing, Ty. And I am going to make an effort to take all of what's in the chat and share it in the email that I send to follow up from this. I will also include a link to the replay for this video for you to share this with your friends and families that may not have been able to make it. Does Crystyn have an Instagram account? Yes, so we're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes. We're going to tell you where to find all of us after this. So in closing, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger can have no more of a literal meaning than now. How can we cultivate resilience and hope in our children during these challenging times? I just want each of you all to just give your answer to that, and let's keep it around a minute because we're right at 1 minute, or we're right at 1:57, and we've got to wrap soon.
Well, I definitely want to start by saying it starts in the womb. With the work with Melinated Moms, we focus on the women from preconception all the way beyond, right? So we have the responsibility of learning what things we need to prepare for before we even start having children. We need to know where the schools are. We need to know what foods to eat. We need to know who to rely on and who can be a part of our community before we get into those spaces. In our history, we've constantly been taught that you prepare for it when you're in the moment, but any other culture does not do that. So we need to change what those narratives are by showing our young girls, like I said, starting from 11 and 12 years old, this is what your body is. This is who you talk to about this. This is how you educate yourself on being prepared for motherhood, for womanhood, for sisterhood, for being that extra person that someone needs, So with Melinated Moms, we're actually about to do our relaunch with our website and our membership in July. And one of our biggest pushes for the month of July is co-parenting. So we want to talk about how both parents can be involved, whether you're married, single, or whatever your situation is, how you both can have a supportive role in the growth and thrivingness of your child through different activities. We also will be doing conversations like this, community conversations, virtual conversations, where we're speaking to the needs of our children first and the parents second. So we've actually partnered with Advocates for Children of New Jersey to start these type of conversations, to talk about what other experiences everyone is having, and then creating real life solutions with those families at the table, because they are the main stakeholders, not the investors, the actual parents who are utilizing us.
Yes. Thank you, Jaye. Thank you, Jaye. Who wants to go next? Eugenia, Joe, Crystyn?
I'll let Joe. He hasn't. Yeah.
You want me to go?
Yeah, you go ahead.
I think it really, I think want to piggyback on what Crystyn said, in that it's all about how we show up, and we can't allow other people to define who we are. And that's hard, but we have to be very vigilant, because a lot of that stuff happens so early. It happens in the children's books that we read to our kids. It happens with the programming that we allow our kids to watch. It happens in the language that we talk to our kids. And, when we speak to them on a regular basis, we have to be very careful about how we define ourselves, and that we're not using white supremacist ideology when we talk to our kids. We have to make sure that we are letting them know that Black is beautiful, and that Black is not always the negative. It's not always the evil thing. It's not always the criminal. It's not always the bad guy in films and TV shows and in children's books. Like, whenever there's something bad happening, the whole page on the children's book gets dark. And we have to start changing that narrative, so that when we go out into the world, we allow our children to go out into the world, that they have the cultural fortitude to be able to say, you know what, I'm Black, I'm brown, I'm beautiful, I'm proud, and nothing that you can say, because I've been prepared by my parents and my community, can change that. So I think that's how I think it starts at the foundation. It starts in the womb. It starts right after you're born, because children pick up ideas about race and about color at the very beginning of language development. And so we just have to be very intentional about how we speak to our kids.
Yes. Eugenia?
I'll just piggyback on that as well. For me, and this is just getting all the way real, you have your Black folks that have moved outside of Black communities that are, as my family, my kids go to independent school. It's on us to really stay connected to the communities that we're no longer living within, whether that's moving back to those communities, whether that's investing in those communities, whether that's volunteering in those communities. Because if I have my children in a predominantly white neighborhood, but I'm telling them Black is beautiful, but we don't go to Black communities, we don't associate with other Black people, we don't talk about low-income Black people, it's just as much my fault that they're getting these messages as it is at school. So I think that, I'm not here to shame anyone on where they live or where they go to school or what they choose to do with their families, but we have to remain connected to our communities and make sure that we're teaching our children to be connected to those communities and be comfortable in those communities. So my little 2 cents.
Yes.
All right, and I'm gonna be as brief as I possibly can be. I'm going straight Wakanda style. Tell them who you are. That is how we move forward with our children. Tell them who they are. And outside of everything we're discussing, speak to their spirit.
Yeah.
Speak to their spirit. Because at some point, children are going to develop their own personalities. They're going to have their own thoughts. And some of the things, I'm very much about self-imaging. I'm very much about giving you books and resources and photos that look like you, so you can see reflections of beauty in yourself. But listen to your child's spirit. See what they're receiving from you. And if they're going in another direction, honor that, right? Apologize when you're wrong.
Yes.
Own your stuff as parents so that you can model what that looks like for your child. And stay in tune with yourself, because if you are not well, then your cup cannot overflow to make sure that your children are well too.
Yes. I'm gonna kind of reflect some of what all of you all have said, and also just put it into context that, and we had this discussion in preparation as well, that this is just a piece of time in the large story of our history of who we are. And so when we understand that larger story, when we educate our children to get the larger story and to understand that this is just a piece of time, then I think that gives us a redemptive narrative, because we recognize our resilience, we recognize our strength, we recognize the way we as people have overcome so many challenges throughout history, and still we rise. Right? And so a part of how we can also arm them is by giving them the tools to thrive. If you're going to give them that iPad, put them in the direction of where to go online. If you're going to tell them to go sit down somewhere and be quiet, hand them through your own eyes books to read when they're there. Give them the tools to thrive. We cannot expect for other people to do this for us. We have to do it for ourselves. And with that, sovereignty, us being able to create our programs for our children, like Melinated Moms, curriculums for our children, like Through Our Own Eyes, programs like Crystyn's program and Eugenia's programs and my programs on Quartz Wellness Collective. We need to direct our children, our adults, our communities to these resources and stop thinking that they don't exist. That's just laziness if we say that. They exist, they're here. You know it now if you didn't know it before. So please, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us, and also have everyone, before we hop off, tell you how to get in touch with them and where you can find more information about your program so that everyone here knows where to get those resources from.
Well, you guys can find me on all forms of social media at Melinated Moms, MELINATEDMOMS. You also can subscribe to our website at melinatedmoms.com. Again, we're going to be doing a relaunch, so you'll see a brand new site starting July 1st. But subscribe now so that you'll be able to get all of the benefits. And I'm always available. I really appreciate this. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Jaye. Joe?
Yeah, you can definitely follow me on Instagram at Project Ujima LLC. You can also check out my website. It's project-ujima.com. That's UJIMA.com. And Through Our Own Eyes, you can get that on Amazon. There's a direct link. I think, Amber, you put that in the chat. And if you work in schools, or if you work for organizations and you think you'd like to, order a large amount, talk to me specifically. Because I can get you some discounts that Amazon will not be able to give
you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Eugenia?
Yes, you can follow Brown Parent Report on Instagram at The Brown Parent. You can subscribe and submit your survey on our website, thebrownparentreport.com. The survey also has a feedback session. Please offer feedback. This is a growing project. Hopefully it's a community initiative. And thank you, Amber, for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Crystyn.
Yeah, so I'm Crystyn Wright Diaz, Crystyn with 2 Y's, double Y. Crystyn Wright Diaz on Facebook. On Instagram, I'm Crystyn W, double Y's. I'm not really on Instagram much, but I do check my my messages. And then my website is also minnieendeavors.com. It's very basic, but it does have all the different workshops that I offer for community centers, for shelters, for parent associations at schools, and just anybody who's interested in any programming.
Thank you, Crystyn. And again, I'm Amberly Forrester. The Flow Coach is my handle on Instagram. My business handle is Quartz Wellness. That's QUARTZ Wellness. And my website is quartzwellnesscollective.com. Again, QUARTZ. And you can find more conscious conversations like this. I do weekly webinars on professional and personal development. My mission is to make personal and professional development affordable and accessible for minorities, women, and children of color. I have in-school programs also, and I'll be collaborating with these fine folks on the calls. But you can find out more about my in-school programs on my website, as well as if you have a school that you need, that you recommend that they focus more on the whole children, as we discussed in the beginning of this. I am able to certify, as of this fall, I'll be able to certify teachers in positive education. And positive education is attention to the whole student and whole community of the school. So I will be able to certify educators, administrators, and schools, teachers in positive education. And I have a curriculum called Blooming with Intention. That's a homeroom curriculum that helps them to start the day with their personal development before getting into their schoolwork. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm just so full of joy right now that we had this conversation. I could literally cry. I'm gonna hold back my tears though, and just say that I'm so grateful for your time and for the participation of our panelists. And I hope that you will share this video and share the email that you get, sign up for our newsletters, and keep circulating this wealth within our communities. All right, so happy Juneteenth, everyone. Go, be well, be powerful. Lots of love to you all. We out.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.